Welcome to the premiere episode of
Album X-Ray.
We probably really should have thought of a name for this before we started, but
Yeah, I mean, coming up with names is not the best part of the show, though. The part of the show is the commenting on the album, which we will be getting to momentarily. I am Ganley, and joining me is Ralph.
hi.
And this week we will be discussing the sophomore album from Black Sabbath called Paranoid.
Great album.
Are you
One of the best.
Are you familiar with Black Sabbath?
I'm very familiar with Black Sabbath. Definitely one of my favorite bands, and this is one of my favorite albums by them. And we thought it would be a good one to try this idea of kind of doing like a commentary over an album as we listen to an album, just talking about facts, our feelings about it, and just generally being... Oh, that's what we were going to call it. We were thinking about calling it Talking Over Albums.
Talking over
Or
albums?
like annoying guys talking over albums. We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, any one of those is a golden name for a show.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had the opportunity to see Black Sabbath live?
Yes, back when Ozzy still had human vocal cords.
Human vocal cords?
Human vocal cords. I don't know what they're putting into Ozzy's throat now, but some pig vocal cords or something. But I saw him back in 1999 when Pantera and Deftones were opening for the big Black Sabbath reunion, and Ozzy could still hit the notes. I mean, I've seen footage from the most recent tour, and Geezer and Tony still kill it. Awesome as they ever were, but just unfortunately, Ozzy's voice. He's an old man. You can only sing like a British banshee for only about 50 years, which is plenty of time.
I feel like the entire length of our chances to see Ozzy he's always been an old man.
It's true.
So
But for a while, he was an old man that could actually still belt it out, and now he's just becoming an old man that needs to be taken care of, and
right.
needs to bang his hairdresser. And
Yeah, what the hell? Why would he do it? Was it his hairdresser? For some reason I thought it was his nanny, and then I realized he has grown children. Why would he have a nanny for his grown children?
he needs a nanny.
Yeah.
Let's play the album.
Yeah, let's get to it. This is we'll get to the first song right here. If you're not familiar with Black Sabbath, you should probably get familiar because
We're going to be talking about them, and we can't catch you up to speed on all of it. This show isn't meant to be educational.
now the kids these days like listening to the music on YouTube. So
Is that where we're playing it on? Streaming it on YouTube?
yeah, we're here.
It's on vinyl.
We're on. Well, yeah, it's on vinyl. It's on tape. It's on probably every format you can imagine. So starting things off is War Pigs, Luke's War. Why Luke's War?
Luke's Wall.
Luke's Wall. Luke's
Which
War.
we don't, yeah, I tried to look that up, and I've read a couple of books. I still don't know why they call the second half of it Luke's Wall. But the first half is War Pigs, and it's an anti-war song. Was originally entitled Walpurgis. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it even had alternate lyrics. It was originally supposed to be about general evil and made more overt references to witchcraft and Satanism. And eventually the lyrics just kind of changed into an anti-war, anti-human beings being evil against each other.
What I don't understand is that
This is going to be hard because I really just want to sing along to this.
yeah, like here I am listening to the album. This album was released September 18th, 1970. It was recorded between June 16th and 21st in 1970, so they cranked that album out in 5 days. It's the second album from Black Sabbath. It was released, it was recorded at Island Studios in London, and it was released on Vertigo in the UK and Warner in the US. It was produced by Roger Bain.
Roger Bain, who also, this I do remember, he also produced their first album. I think he produced their first three altogether, and then the cocaine took hold by around Volume 4 came out, and they moved on to letting Cocaine produce all the records. which, oddly enough, turned out to be a good business decision. Or at least a good artistic decision, because those later albums, I mean, there's a lot of debate, but I love those later Black Sabbath albums. The one that the cocaine was producing.
Not as much cocaine, though, on Paranoid. With
No.
also, Roger Bain produced Budgie and Judas Priest's first album.
Yeah, Budgie, also one of those underrated, not particularly well-known metal bands, early metal bands, back when metal was still very much so rooted in the blues and hard rock. I mean, you can hear it on this. I mean, most kids these days who are really into heavy metal, this might not sound particularly that heavy, but this was the heaviest shit in the world back in 1971?
1970, yeah.
1970.
This was a lot of flower power going on in 1970 also, so this is right after Woodstock.
Right.
So, yeah,
This was like Black Sabbath's answer to flower power. It was like this big, evil, aggressive music. You know? I think Black Sabbath definitely had some hippie qualities to them, but were not hippies themselves at all.
No.
It was definitely, they were kind of born out of Birmingham, which is very
Steel town.
Yeah, very bleak, industrialized steel town, and that's where Sabbath are from. You know, it's not like San Francisco and
hate Asbury.
Right. It's a rough town, and it breeds rough music.
Have you ever seen Faith No More live? This is a song of theirs that they also include in their live set. This is on...
Oh, yeah, Faith No More covers this song, too. They do a great version. I've never seen Faith No More live, but I've heard live bootlegs of them playing War Pigs, and they absolutely nail it.
But this is also... This is... Walpoigs. Do you have any more information on that? Because that's...
Well, that was the original title.
that was a title of the album.
Oh, War Pigs.
War Pigs, and then Walpurgs.
Walpurge is what they originally wanted to call this song and the album. But yeah, the album was originally supposed to be called War Pigs. Hence why the artwork for this album, if we can talk about it for a second, is a weird-looking psychedelic guy with a sword and a shield. He's supposed to be the war pig. You know, it was supposed to be like that whole album was supposed to be kind of a commentary on the Vietnam War. And what happened is that Paranoid suddenly became a hit single. Before the album even came out, the record label knew Paranoid was going to be the single. And they were like, you got to call the album Paranoid. And Black Sabbath are funny from reading the story. Like, Black Sabbath weren't like a lot of other bands at the time who were very like big into like standing up to their record label. They definitely did their music exactly the way they wanted to, but when it came time to like name the album and artwork and stuff like that, it's like it just seemed like Black Sabbath didn't really care. It was like, yeah, release whatever single you want, call the album whatever you want, you know, whatever you want to change the title around. Like Black Sabbath were definitely innovators, but they were and definitely had a vision and stuck to their guns when it came to the quality of the music. But they were complete pushovers when it came to how to design or name and market their albums. They were just sort of like, sure, whatever.
They were not the creative geniuses, I guess, of marketing. That's why Ozzy married a woman from the record company.
Married his manager.
Yeah, so they knew music. They didn't know how to market an album. I guess War Pigs would not have gone over in 1970 because at the time, people were not as turned against Vietnam, I guess, popularly as they were later in time.
Probably not, yeah.
And Paranoid, I guess, is a less offensive title to release commercially throughout Europe or Western Europe at the time in the United States. So I guess this would be the Luke's War part of the album.
Yes.
Or of the song.
From now we are officially
Luke's
listening
Wall.
to...
I keep calling it Luke's War. Luke's Wall.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But this is officially, the Luke's Wall part of the album. Don't know why it's called Luke's Wall. Have no idea who Luke... Oh, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I do. And maybe we can drop this in as an insert. But I think Luke is the name of their roadie.
Okay.
And I think the wall aspect is supposed to be their
Wall of
wall.
sound?
Yeah, like their wall of amps. And, like, I think this part is, it is like a wall of sound. I'm completely talking out of my ass here, but I like that theory. Let's go with it.
Okay. Luther Rhodey gets a part of the song. Have you ever seen the other version? Now, you see the album version that I have here.
Yes.
With it's got color on it. Have you seen the black and white version that some people have?
No.
There's like a bootleg kind of black and white version. I feel like there's other versions of the cover. I bought this at CD World when I was in high school, and then Chris had Ozzy sign it for me, so I have an Ozzy signed copy of War Pigs. It's also the same version we're listening to right now, the remastered version.
Huh. I know there was something, I'm pretty sure it was this album, is that this album actually has a remixed version in an early 1970s version of surround sound.
Oh?
Yeah.
How does that work?
It was a special record with 4 grooves on it, or 2 grooves corresponding next to each other.
Here comes Paranoid.
Paranoid.
The leads, I guess the only single, only single from this album. Or when Iron Man was a single as well, but this is the lead single from August of 1970, prior to the release. I've noticed the, now you're a musician, Ralph.
Yes.
Is there something with the timing in the song that's a little off to you? Like, does it feel like it's pulsating to you?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
there's no
but I think
syncing?
I don't think that's a mistake, though. That's just Black Sabbath. One of the things that made them innovators is that they had weird groove switches. I mean, Bill Ward in particular was really good at controlling a groove, and it is like a weird, like where he throws those snare hits in are it's brilliant. It's one of the reasons why I never really got behind the most recent Black Sabbath reunion 100%. I'm glad they did it. I'm still bitter they didn't include Bill Ward.
Well, they used Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine.
All right, then Brad Wilk didn't even want to like tour on it. Like that's the thing. Like, not to say like I don't know. It just the whole thing seemed like stupid to me. Like they could have like replaced him with somebody else that like there was mutual respect or whatever. I don't know. They got Brad Wilk, who's not doing anything as far as I can tell.
Hey guys, I have nothing to do. I'll play on your album. Not that he's an unaccomplished drummer.
No, I love Brad Wilk.
He's no Bill Ward.
He's no Bill Ward. I mean, he's not that like it's not even a better thing. It's just Bill Ward has like a looseness to how he plays.
Yeah.
This is an interesting quote. Bill Ward once said that his rule of designing drums for Black Sabbath is when the groove that Tony Iommi, the guitarist of Black Sabbath, is playing,
like here,
is solid, like something like Iron Man, which we'll be getting to soon.
Yeah.
And it's something that like is just like it's like set in stone, just a solid groove. That gave Bill Ward more license to play softer. So in heavy parts with a big, heavy, solid groove, he would actually play softer and jazzier and throw in more ghost notes and, more fills and stuff like that. And when the parts were lighter, that's when he would go like heavier and more solid. So you see that sometimes in like the quieter parts of songs have like this like really big drum sound to it.
Well, kind of like this part, there's a very heavy guitar riff, but there's like kind of
the drums,
boom chick drum part.
Right.
And now we move on to the softest song on the album.
Right.
Planet Caravan.
Right.
Which
is having trouble.
She'll cue up. Here we go. I think a lot of people, for some reason, thought that this was not an Ozzy's song.
Yeah, there's a weird urban legend about this that it's either Bill Ward singing or maybe somebody else in a totally different band.
It's definitely Ozzy though.
No, it's definitely Ozzy.
He's going through. Let me see. I had the thing he's going through. He's going through some sort of 1960s technology.
I think he's going through a guitar amp. What's it called? But I do. This song is interesting. It's about a space gypsies. Was the whole idea of it. It's like about a bunch of guys on a spaceship traveling the cosmos.
And And this was this kind of fit in with like a hippie tone of the
I was
album.
about to say we should mention the fact that this was an excellent album to burn one to.
Well,
Yeah, like this song in particular is like this is where I guess you would be peaking.
right. 3 songs in, yeah. We're about
Extraordinarily stoned now.
10 minutes into the album.
But did you find out?
No, I can't find it. I had it,
Hold
but
on, I got it. Tony Iommi overdubbed a flute on this song. Oh, Leslie Speakers.
that's what it was. Yeah.
To create the weird. It's like a creative vibrato effect.
Now they would just use the computer effect. Back then they use like actual in studio type of things.
It's funny. There's actually a version of this that's pretty interesting that has a little explanation on how Black Sabbath wrote their songs. Geezer Butler, the bass player, wrote all the lyrics. So people are like, oh, so that means Ozzy did nothing? Not necessarily true. What they would do when writing songs is that, the rest of the band would write the music, and then Ozzy would just say whatever came to his head, and the lyrics weren't particularly good. And, but he would write the melody with his own lyrics, and then later Geezer would be like, oh, that's nice, Ozzy. What nonsense were you singing about? All right, throw that out. I'll, write you something cool to sing about. So the original lyrics to this is about Ozzy having sex with a lovely lady in the woods. Was the original lyrics to this. It was just sort of like, we were so in love, we hugged under the trees, and wonderful melody, but the lyrics are kind of sappy and kind of silly.
Yeah. Doesn't fit with the tone of the rest of the album.
Right. So Geezer turned it into about space travel, man.
Geezer's the unsung hero of Black Sabbath. He saved all these songs from Ozzy's
Lyrics.
Ozzy's bizarre lyrics. I mean, Ozzy wrote a lot of lyrics on future solo albums that he did.
Debatable, but
well,
yeah.
According to Ozzy.
According to Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne and a team of lawyers
Yeah.
who will sue you out of existence.
All
Ozzy wrote all of, what was it, the third album? Was it Speak of the Devil?
Oh, yeah. I wrote it all after Randy Rhoads left. No one helped me.
No one helped me.
It was all me. Jake Lee didn't put down any tracks. Oh man! And then they went back and they like dubbed them over. That's for a different. It's for a different episode. That's yeah. They ripped people off.
But
Great Pantera cover of this song too.
yes. Yeah, I forgot that Pantera covered this. It was weird too because I remember when Pantera covered this, they like included an apology, which was a really stupid way of doing it. But
Seems like a Phil Anselmo thing to do.
Yeah, it was like, look, just because we did this song and it's all light doesn't mean we're going in a new direction and we're become hippies. We're still metal as hell.
I would never think that of you, Phil.
Yeah, somehow I didn't think. We know who Black Sabbath are. We know you're just doing. We just think the song's cool.
We don't want to pick the wussiest song of Black Sabbath. We're going to pick the other song of Black Sabbath. But that's
We're gonna have to do Electric Funeral and Hole in the Sky now to make up for the fact that we covered Planet of Caravan.
But that's
excellent version.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of their underappreciated songs. But then again, here comes one of their signatures.
Definitely. I knew this song before I even heard the original version of it, just from Beavis and Butthead.
Oh yeah,
singing it.
This
Interesting thing, this drum thumping part.
Yeah.
When you go to see Black Sabbath live, or at least back in 1999, Ozzy would keep this part going for like 5 minutes while he just screamed at the audience to like, louder, louder, you fuckers! Ah! Like Ozzy would refuse. We're not going to play Iron Man until you are bringing this place down.
Oh yeah, he still did it.
Oh, he still does.
Yeah,
that
he still
shit?
does it. I saw them twice on their most recent tour. So yeah, he still does it.
He loves doing that. He's like, I'm not. He shames you into losing your mind, in his words, or else we're not going to play Iron Man until you are loud enough to shake the roof.
How many Black Sabbath concerts do you think Ozzy just walked off stage and never came back because the crowd was not loud enough?
I would say at least 0. Ozzy. See, that's the cute thing about Ozzy, and I do love Ozzy, even though I like to make fun of him a lot. But the great thing about the most awesome thing about Ozzy is that you can tell while he's on stage, he genuinely loves it.
Oh yeah.
You can tell that he loves interacting with the audience, and like he's just feeding off of it, and it just like is keeping him alive.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like that. That's such a great little drum set. So like a lot of the drum switches in here are freaking awesome. This is what I'm talking about. Like, listen to what Bill Ward's doing. Like, solid groove. Bill Ward's gonna play around on the drums. But back to Ozzy. I do think that with Ozzy's showmanship and everything, it's like he can't help himself. He's like a kid, and I think he really does want you to go crazy before every song. Because he's excited to play the song as you are to hear Iron Man.
He used to pour water all over himself. He would spray the audience.
Yeah.
Supposedly the water was because he would urinate himself on stage. I don't know how true that story is. He didn't do it in the last tour I saw. I guess he has like his continence problems are taken care of. But
I have a catheter now. It's much easier.
I have a lubricated catheter now. Maybe you all should check it out. No, thank you, Mr. Osborne. I think I'll be all right.
Real quick, we should talk about this with Iron Man. The story of Iron Man.
Sure.
It's not about Tony Stark.
No.
And it has nothing to do with the Marvel character. The character of Iron Man is a man who travels. What was it? He travels into the future and sees that the apocalypse has happened and that humanity's been wiped out. Then he returns back to his own time, but as he's passing through a magnetic field, he turns into steel, and he gets superpowers, and he becomes this weird Iron Man. And no one believes him when he comes back and says that the world's about to end. So he decides to use his steel powers to bring an end to the world and create the apocalypse that he had foreseen.
All in 5 minutes and 55 seconds of a Black Sabbath album.
That whole story, that whole epic story can be told.
That could not be told by Hollywood in a 3-hour movie with a $400 million budget.
Basically, it's whatchamacallit. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, almost like 12 Monkeys or something.
Yeah.
You know, or what was another one? Or Terminator.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Terminator was written under the idea of Iron Man. Mind blown.
Mind has been blown. You learned something here on the yet-to-be titled show. But we just went through the bridge of the song, which has an awesome solo in it, and then it just kind of resets to the groove of this song, too.
Really doesn't get any better than this fucking album.
No. And you know what? Like, I'll get to the reviews when we're done with the album. Some people did not like this when it came out. I mean, reviews wise, I'll get to that when we're at the end of the album.
Getting closer to it.
But yeah,
can we just talk real quick though
Sure.
about how Ozzy suddenly becomes like they try to do a thing like Ozzy, I guess traveling. That's him traveling back into time or whatever. He goes and turns into a chipmunk.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's really cool.
I like the videos they used to do back then with like the pulsating colors and the rear projection thing they used to use with us in school when we were kids.
Yeah, the
overhead
old
projector thing where they would put like a colorful water on it and they would pulse.
Yeah, an oil. What's that called? It's called oil lighting or something.
Yeah.
I think that was actually invented by one of Pink Floyd's roadies.
Really?
I
can see
so.
that.
I don't know what that's called. But
Ozzy would kind of just stand there like this.
Oh God, there's a great video. I mean, we should talk about it if we ever do the first Black Sabbath album.
Oh yeah.
There's amazing live footage of Ozzy. If you ever want to know like why people like especially metalheads still worship Ozzy, well, I mean he's done a lot of stuff, but like if anyone ever doubted Ozzy's like intensity or like realness level, you gotta watch old footage of Ozzy playing songs like Black Sabbath or even Iron Man. Any song that had like a big outro. Electric Funeral is what we're listening to now. Another great song. But any extended like instrumental part, Ozzy would like headbang and like lose his mind. One of the first times ever I think anyone probably had ever seen anybody go that hard at headbanging. Before Ozzy, I feel like headbanging was just kind of nodding your head.
Yeah.
You know? But then like Ozzy took it to a much more violent, ridiculous level and kind of developed this stigma of being a madman on stage.
Well, at the time, having a band where people thought that they were worshiping Satan, considering if you listen to Electric Funeral, which is on now, it's about another
One
60s...
of the most evil songs, songs that Sabbath did.
It's about nuclear war, which was on everybody's mind in 1970,
Right.
and still in 2017.
2017.
We've come a long way in the past 47 years.
Still worrying about nuclear war.
Yes.
I've heard theories that Paranoid or War Pigs or whatever was actually supposed to be a concept album of sorts, which I don't believe. But there is themes on it that are consistent. I mean, we just got done with a song about Iron Man starting the apocalypse, and now here we're in a song about a nuclear holocaust. So a lot of the album does seem to have to deal with war, nuclear war, a man turning into an Iron Man and starting an apocalypse, planet caravan, space travel to like escape a dead planet. It's all sorts of like, you know, these this impending doom.
Yeah, they're very harsh concepts to come by. Like before this, there was protest music that was going on in the 60s, but this is kind of more abstract than that. It's more, it's not as directly like protesting something as it is just singing around it. Like,
well, a lot of it's like despair. A lot of people also look at Sabbath as like one of the first, and Paranoid in particular as being one of the first goth records, which is definitely debatable. But there really wasn't too many bands that did really dark lyrical subject matter before Sabbath. It was like, you know, it was like horror music. Like you have horror movies. Black Sabbath was like horror music.
Well, it's named after a horror movie, Black Sabbath.
Exactly, yeah. It was like the idea of like, hey, instead of just doing songs about like loving your baby and you know, like love songs and songs about hippie power and stuff like that, what if we like, you know, explore despair, depression, war? No one really done that, you know. I mean, most protest songs are like, you know, give peace a chance.
Yeah.
Whereas,
I'm the fortunate son. Like,
Right.
They're very direct and like commercial.
Right.
You know what they're talking about. They're not horror movie versions of the present.
right, Sabbath was kind of like wallowing in the misery, which is war and tragedy.
Which is great when you're a teenager. When you and I discovered this album, because like that's what I started.
Feels deep, man.
Yeah, I started listening to Black Sabbath around their reunion in '98. So I went out and got Reunion in '98, the double album, which I still
That's
have.
a great live album, actually.
Yeah. And I got this album around the same time because this is like their signature album, and it's comforting for a teenager to be like, yes, this is dark, because it's kind of stuff that you like when you're a teenager, and you as an adult start to appreciate growing up with that kind of music, and you're like, yeah, this is an influence on my life in some way.
Well, you know, it's weird though, because like it's weird to think about Black Sabbath as being like realistic, or like, you know what I mean, like socially conscious lyricists. Like no one ever really praises Geezer Butler's lyrics as much as I think they should. If you listen to a lot of like, all right, well, if like you think about like listening to the Beatles and their anti-war songs, like All We Are Saying Is Give Peace a Chance, or actually that was just a John Lennon song, but whatever. If you think about it, like a lot of those songs, not to talk any sort of shit on those songs, but if I might talk a little bit of shit,
Be my guest.
I kind of prefer a song like War Pigs that points out some harsh truth about war. You know, that whole thing about why don't the rich and powerful go out and fight? They leave that role to the poor. You know, like pointing out that it's only poor people who suffer in war, and that it really has behind it, a lot of motivations from rich and powerful people sending poor people out to fight wars for them. This song, also bleak, Hand of Doom.
I think this is we're starting to get into drugs now with Push the Needle In.
Well, this song was still about Vietnam. He even mentions Vietnam by name, which I don't think.
I'm getting ahead of us. This is my favorite song, actually, on this
This
album.
is a great fucking song. But it's basically about U.S. soldiers return, or soldiers in general returning back from Vietnam and turning to heroin to deal with their post-traumatic stress. Once again, bleak as fuck. Definitely, realistic.
And it's quiet. And then
This is this the
heavy. I like the mood change in it, where it's like, it's kind of like you're using drugs, and then like, well, I've never used this, but
You've never used drugs.
I've never used drugs, but like I feel like it's displaying that it's like you're calm and you're using drugs, and then suddenly boom,
Right.
like everything kind of explodes, and like
Well,
you're back in the war now.
Right, the song has this sort of like these calm bluesy parts, and then these explosions of anger and violence, and then this part where it builds up. Slayer covered this song.
Yes.
Did a great version of it.
Very basic too. Very geezery, basically.
Very geezery.
Well, you're a bass player.
Yeah, and Geezer is definitely one of the. For my money, Geezer is one of the most underrated bass players in rock music. I mean, he had like a tone. He was constantly locked in with Tony, and just. I don't want to say he was like a second guitar, because that's not really true. Even though Geezer started off his career playing guitar, so it kind of does make a little bit of sense, but like he just figured out a way to fill up all the area around what Tony was doing, and just created this big, sludgy, snaky sound underneath like Tony's bluesy stuff.
And they're very heavy for a 3-piece.
Yes, well, 4-piece technically with vocals,
4-piece,
but
yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah, 3, yeah.
For your guitar, bass, and drums band. With
Considering
the
there's no rhythm guitar, Tony Iommi was pulling both lead and rhythm duty. Geezer's bass kind of sometimes did double as a rhythm guitar too.
And seeing Geezer play live, like I like watching. Everybody wants to watch the guitar player when you watch him live. You want to watch Tony. You want to see like, oh, there's like his caps on his fingers because he had them torn off in an industrial accident. Very Manchester.
Yeah.
Or Birmingham. They're all
They're all
steel
the same
cities.
area, steel towns.
But you watch Geezer's fingers, you can't even see them moving when he's playing bass. Like, I wish they showed him more playing live.
Geezer playing bass live is a sight to behold. He also, Tony is great, but Tony doesn't really move around that much either. But Geezer was kind of his own sort of like showman too. He was big into headbanging, was constantly moving back and forth, and his fingers just going nuts. One of the best things I saw when I saw Black Sabbath live in 1999. I've seen Black Sabbath since then a couple times too, but that first time in 1999 was definitely the best. Was Geezer playing NIB, which is not on this album, but a very classic Geezer Butler bass song. And he played it faster than on the album, way more intense and better, and just it was kind of life-changing to see.
Yeah, it's cool seeing him play the intro to NIB, because that's basically just a song where they're like, Geezer, you can do like the opening minute and a half of it on as a bass solo and just tear it up. Which is one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs, and it's on their first album, which we'll have to cover one day.
Yeah, I'd like to next.
But now we're back to
the smooth. Back to the smoothness again.
the smooth 106.7 Black Sabbath.
I realize we're almost done with this.
Yeah, we're
this album flies by. It's so good.
those 40-minute LPs with the 20 minutes on each side really kind of fly by back from those days.
You know what? Let's talk about this. I never finished it. We were talking about there is actually a quadraphonic mix of this album.
Like Quadrophenia.
Right. I don't know if that's what it's called, but it is. It was an old 1970s technology that predated surround sound, but it was basically surround sound. And it was basically, 2 sets of tracks that would play, and basically you would set the speakers up in a square around you, and it would recreate like a 5.1 surround sound.
Back in the 70s.
Back in the 70s. And this album was one of the few. There wasn't a lot of albums that were mixed in quadraphonic sound, but Black Sabbath's Paranoid was one of them. But it's also, I'm shocked. I've known this album forever. I only found this out like in the past year because they recently re-released it with a DVD that had the surround sound mix.
Really?
And it's different than this mix entirely. Like they use different takes, they use different vocal takes and stuff like that. It's basically like listening to a different album. There's different effects on the instruments, like different reverb on everything. There's a different take of the Paranoid guitar solo. So if you can find it, definitely play it. Definitely check it out for hardcore Black Sabbath fans. A totally different remixed version of Paranoid exists out there that most people haven't heard.
Quadraphonic sound.
Quadraphonic sound. I think it was called 4.0. Sorry, back in the day, but they've remixed it recently in 5.1.
And now to Rat Salad, the Bill Ward solo, which.
Well, the rest of the band is in it too, but it is highlighting how awesome Bill Ward is.
Right. I always think of how albums are now. Like, would they put a drum solo on an album now? Would they be like, you're an awesome drummer, we'll give you a drum solo?
Probably not.
No. Especially on an 8-song album. They're like, one of the songs is going to be a drum solo.
The record label's going to be like, can't just make that download only on your MySpace or something?
Yeah.
Who goes to MySpace? Exactly. No one wants to hear that shit.
It's on your Friendster page.
But I think it's great. I wish bands would do it.
There's like a bonkers solo that they do, like whoever the guy who was playing drums for them in their latest tour.
Yeah.
He does a pretty cool solo when the band just goes off stage and it's just him. But it's still Rat Salad. Like, you can't do Rat Salad if it's on Bill Ward.
Right.
Did he do it when you saw them with Bill Ward back in 99?
I don't remember if he did it during Rat Salad, but he definitely had a drum solo. I can't remember what he did it during. I think he might... Actually, I feel like it might have been during Children of the Grave. But I could be wrong.
Lost to history.
Sorry, I'm trying to find out who is playing drums for them now. Tommy Kloufetos.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was something Greek sounding.
Here's the pure solo part of the song.
Yeah. Fortunately, Bill Ward has had some health problems in the past couple of years, and they kind of threw him under the bus that it was his health problems was the reason why they didn't invite him back for the reunion. But, which I understand, but I think is also kind of bullshit. I think they could have, probably brought him in to at least record the album. I think the thing is that he didn't want to tour for it. He didn't think he'd physically be able to handle playing this every night. But I still would have liked to have heard what he would have done on the album.
Yeah.
Have Bill Ward come in and write on the album. They did it anyway with, they brought in the guy from Rage Against the Machine to write on the album. And he didn't even end up touring with them. Why not, do a similar deal with Bill Ward?
Maybe they just didn't want to let him down. They're like, you can record on the album, but you can't come see us live. And they're like, hey, Brad Wilk, you can record on our album, but you can't come play live. He's like, I don't care.
Worried that it's going to... I have a feeling it had to do with money. Probably. I have a feeling he probably, in complete fairness, Bill Ward probably wanted the same amount of money as everybody else.
Probably.
Which is fine if you're also willing to tour for it. The thing is, the mindset was probably like, look, if you're just going to play on the album and then fuck off and want the same amount of money, and profits from the album, even though you're just sitting at home and not touring to support it, we don't want to do that. And he was probably like, well, who cares? I'm playing on the album. Well, that's my guess that what happened.
There was rumors he was sick, and Sharon of course factored into it, even though Sharon factors into everything. They're like, Sharon didn't want to come on tour. Why? I guess she's just a scapegoat. But here we are, Jack the Stripper, final song of the album, Fairies Wear Boots. Now this is Jack the Stripper / Fairies Wear Boots?
This part of the song is called Jack the Stripper, because it sounds kind of like you would do a striptease to it.
It doesn't have it on this album, though. Like,
I think they dropped that because they realized it was confusing to give certain songs to, because people were like, oh, I love that song Jack the Stripper,
Yeah,
and people would be like, what?
If you were looking at it like on your record, like you wouldn't see a groove for Jack the Stripper. You're like, where the hell is that?
Right.
You would just see the fourth song on the second side, which would be Fairies Wear Boots.
Now, this is a very high theory,
Yeah.
but I've heard a rumor that Black Sabbath, on their early albums, were doing so many drugs, they thought that they had written songs that they didn't really write. And that's why the albums have songs that don't seem to work.
I believe that. Okay.
Or an even deeper, higher theory is that Black Sabbath wrote songs in alternate realities, man, that you can't even hear unless you're like an interdimensional being that can hear, like there's a song within a song, man.
Any one of those explanations would make sense to me.
But yeah, Jack the Stripper is over now, and now we're in Fairies Wear Boots.
So once they change it up there, it would become Fairies Wear Boots, which is it's a departure from the bleak war and drugs into making fun of Nazis.
Right, making fun of skinheads.
Yeah, for wearing, I guess in England,
boots.
they wear like their Doc Martens with the red laces. I don't know if red laces were the big thing back then. Right. But I guess they had a problem with Nazis. You have your pseudo Satan worshippers and your Nazis clashing in 1960s England.
I think the idea was that they got into a fight one night with some skinheads, and
imagine that though. Imagine seeing Black Sabbath fighting skinheads in England in 1960.
Oh God, I wish I could see that. That'd be amazing.
I could see Ozzy like hiding in Iommi and Geezer, and Bill Ward just throwing punches.
Right. Apparently, the hard man in the group was Tony Iommi. Used to be a boxer.
Yeah.
So apparently, Tony Iommi was kind of known as like the main enforcer. But Ozzy used to talk the most shit that would get people in trouble. So it was like a lot of Ozzy talking shit, and then Tony Iommi coming in to like save the day and whoop some ass.
You gotta have a Tony Iommi in the group to protect you from all your Ozzies. Protect the Ozzies.
I've got to protect my Ozzy.
Now, this is another change. There's a lot of change-ups in this album.
Back to the Jack the Stripper.
But there's noticeable change-ups in the songs, but they flow very well together. And if Bill Ward kind of keeps all the songs together like that,
yeah, no, he knew how to handle a group switch like no one's business, man.
The album really flies by.
Hey, the classics, man. You always always leaves you wanting more.
Back to Fairies Wear Boots.
Back to Fairies Wear Boots.
We went out of faithfully restored artwork. See, there might have been an artwork problem with this. It's got some a metal sticker on it from circa probably 1998's compact disc world version.
And you got this one signed by Ozzy.
Yes, sir. I didn't get to meet Ozzy. Chris met Ozzy to sign it.
Yes, Chris will be joining us for future versions of Jerks Talking Over Albums.
I like Jerks Talking Over Albums. We should keep that title.
Jerks Talking Over Albums.
I even like the picture disc like cover of the CD, and it's got texture to it too. Very nice, good one.
There's been a lot of. I'm pretty sure the version of Paranoid that I have is a weird Chinese bootleg because it has no artwork inside. I mean, it has this, but when you pull it out, it's just a white insert on the other side. But I also did buy it at a street fair.
Oh. In Chinatown.
In Chinatown. I bought it from a Chinese bootlegger. No, I did buy it at a street fair, and it had no artwork in it. I also bought Volume 4 that day too, and it did have artwork, but it was missing half of it.
I don't like this artwork. I'm leaving this artwork with the album. The rest of it you can have.
Great ending.
Awesome outro.
It just slowly goes on.
Until next time. Till Masters of Reality.
Till Masters of Reality. Some people say that Tony Iommi is still playing that part. I love when albums fade out like that.
Who's this album got?
Yeah.
Let's
like, okay, did you like that?
Did you like that album?
Let's hear some reviewers from the 1970s completely trash it. Yeah, let's hear some reviews.
Now, Rolling Stone, a periodical that still is around today, but smaller than it was back in the 70s.
I think I've heard of it.
Now, I did some research for this episode to find reviews of the album, and I had to read this one a few times because I was not sure if it was real or not. I can't read the whole thing because it's long and drawn out. But it was done by Nick Torchis in April 15th, 1971. Rolling Stone gave it 1 out of 5 stars. This is the highlight that I found from it. There's a lot of gibberish in the first paragraph, but there's no mention of the album or anything. But it goes on to this part. No, quote, flower children, end quote. They, the sinister emanation of a generation who only yesterday, it seems, were set on changing a world in the shadow of nuclear holocaust and overpopulation into a utopia of peace and love. They drop the knee of a fealty before the Antichrist. They shoot, quote, M, and they engage in group sex. No act is too depraved, no thought too bizarre as they plunge deeper and deeper into the realm of perversion, into the ultimate trip. There's a lot of quotes in here.
See that?
Of their own self-fashioned hell. Orgies, incest, drugs, homosexuality, necrophilia, public nose-picking, Satanism, even living sacrifice. Now, that's just the middle of it. What were you
but that
say?
makes me want to like that's the most amazing review I could ever hear. Like that sounds amazing. I want to see this band.
And then it goes on to this is their music. Although you may not enjoy this quote message, too many quotes in here to make the message quotes effective. Although you may not enjoy a lead singer, and it says Kip Traver, who sounds like Keith Relf whining about tampons stuck up his nostrils, you owe it to yourself as a person concerned with contemporary society or merely with the artistic underground of the youth movement, which is funny to call Ozzy the youth movement, in general, to be aware of the, quote, heavy sounds of bubblegum Satanism. And if you see them live, sometimes they undress a hippie girl.
Really?
See,
all these are good things.
But in 1971, Rolling Stone...
That was scathing.
Yeah, which was... Commercial rock still sucks. Right. At the time, they did not appreciate this. But however, years later, when they were doing their greatest albums of all time, Black Sabbath, number 1, Paranoid, number 131. Sabbath ruled for bummed out 70s kids, and nearly every heavy metal, or every metal and extreme rock of the past 4 decades owes a debt of to Tony Iommi's Granity fuzz guitar, the Visigoth rhythm machine of Bill Ward and Geezer Butler, and Ozzy Osbourne's agonized bray on Paranoid, Iron Man, and War Pigs. So,
see, it's interesting, and this is something I want to bring up too because it's fascinating to me, is that another band that was not well received at the time, who was also instrumental in creating heavy metal, Led Zeppelin. First, especially the first couple Led Zeppelin albums, horrible reviews. Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, it's like... Which I guess, actually, in hindsight, it does kind of make sense, because I think it just goes to show how revolutionary it was. Like, and metal is a form of music that is supposed to be confrontational, so obviously it would ruffle some feathers, like, especially the first time anybody had ever heard anything like that. What's interesting to me, though, is how in recent years I feel like Zeppelin has kind of been accepted as generally a more, technically better and more like artistic
than Black Sabbath.
Than Black Sabbath. But at the time, both bands had like no critical acclaim. Everybody was just sort of like, "What is this?" It's just like sludgy, depraved noise, and I don't know. I think that's awesome. It actually makes me like both bands a lot more.
Was it that hard for the music world, radio, commercial rock magazines, record companies
to understand confrontational music?
Well, I mean, understanding confrontation at the time, but like this album predates us by many decades in our musical understanding. But after, I guess the Beatles had just broken up. Is that where people were at the time? Was everything new? Just like, this is bullshit. This sucks.
Probably.
This sucks because these bands are all coming out of England. You have
Right.
Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, who sound... Ozzy was hugely influenced by the Beatles.
Right.
Ozzy loved the Beatles, and then he turned it into that.
Right.
Which it may seem hard to believe, but as music inspiration goes, that's where these things come from. You don't play the exact music that you listen to. You adapt it. Like Randy Rhoads loved classical music. There's classical music in Slayer. You don't...
Right.
It's a derivative of that. You don't make it like you're not going to hear "I Want to Hold Your Hand" on the first Black Sabbath album,
Right.
but the inspiration is there if you're looking for it. But at the time, people were probably just like, "No, I'm not accepting this as a new form of art."
Right. I think that's the thing. It's like change is always scary to people. That's one. It's also, I think the idea was that like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin were a kind of rejection of a lot of the positivity that was in most quote unquote hippie music at the time, and like flower power music. And I think it was hard, as it's hard for everybody, to realize that era was coming to an end. Not that the 70s were known as like completely the heavy metal decade. I mean, there was a lot of great heavy metal too, but like, I mean, I guess it definitely was kind of like more of a hard rock decade,
And like a disco and punk decade.
right? But like, I think it's always hard for people to realize that, like, you know, your era of music is over, and now something new and a little bit scary is the new shit.
There's also the Christgau. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Christgau.
Christgau.
I looked him up. He makes he has a record guide where he rates albums. Like I guess you used to go to the store and get your record guide, or if you worked at a record store, you'd check your record guide.
Okay.
Like they used to have whatever. But anyway, Paranoid. He says, now I went through a lot of his other stuff. He really kind of poo-poos anything that's not like, I don't know, Beatles.
Okay.
So he says, as for Paranoid, he gave it a C-. He says they do take heavy metal undiments of extremes, and I suppose I can enjoy them as camp, like a horror movie. The title cut is definitely scream-worthy. After all, their audience can't take that Lucifer bit seriously, right? Well, depends on what you mean by serious. Personally, I've always suspected that horror movies, catheter
rock.
catharsized stuff I was too rational to care about in the first place. And C- to him is, quote, is regrettably successful exploitation or basically honest but quite incompetent stab at something more. That's like a pretentious guide to music. But is there anything to that? I mean...
Well, here's the thing about
I'm trying to understand from other people's points of view.
Well, no, you know what? Here's the thing about Sabbath that I would say that the reviewers of the time weren't completely off base, is that it is a different sort of aesthetic than what they were looking for. It is almost closer to kind of like the beginnings of punk, where it's not so much how technical you are or how good you are at writing a melody. Sabbath seemed to be much more concerned with kind of doing like almost like music, but that's not really right though, because it's not like, I mean, they definitely were working men.
Well, like a do-it-yourself type of music.
A do-it-yourself. Well, it's not playing by the thing. One thing you can say about Black Sabbath, and this is absolutely true, and I'll say this. Okay, you know what? Here, I'll say this. With Led Zeppelin, I love Led Zeppelin as well, too. I love Black Sabbath more. And I think most critics at the time were wrong about Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin too, but particularly wrong about Black Sabbath. The great thing about Black Sabbath is that you can't say it was a wholly original idea of music. You know what I mean? No one has ever come forth and been like, oh, I wrote... Led Zeppelin are getting sued constantly for the fact that their songs sound kind of like other people's songs. No one has sued Black Sabbath and said that, like, oh, I wrote Iron Man. Like, it's just impossible. That riff is like, sounds like it's chiseled out of stone, and it just bludgeons you over the head with it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that's kind of like, it's simple, but it's also timeless and completely inimitable. You can't really, you can't say that Black Sabbath were really derivative of not anything that came before it. Like, they had things that they were influenced by.
Blues,
Hendrix, the Beatles, but there wasn't like, but they took it to such a sonic extreme that I think you need to respect it. But I don't think a lot of reviewers are too keen on hearing that. It's weird to hear simple bludgeoning rock music, for the first time.
Yeah, it's very in your face.
It's very in your face, and also I'll give him this too. It is also fairly simple. I mean, Ozzy is basically following the guitar and the bass line. I mean, Iron Man is one of the completely impossible to imitate, and it gets stuck in your head. That being said, the bass, the guitar, and the vocals are all doing the exact same
thing.
Yeah,
he sings the riff.
Yeah.
Has he lost his mind?
And he see, or is he blind?
Yeah, he's singing the riff.
Singing the riff.
Like, who does that?
Not too many people, because that's the thing. It's easy to make. It's definitely like holding it's definitely like putting a target on your face. Like, it's like.
Does it seem like it's kind of pedestrian at the time? Like, oh, look, he's singing along with the riff.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the thing.
It's seen as novel. Like, wow, nobody had done that before.
Right. Well, you know what I think it is? I think people looked at Black Sabbath like they were cavemen. Like, they were like, look at these idiots just thumping away and playing this. Because Iron Man does sound like, it's just like, gah, gah, ah.
Yeah, it's
no. Like, it sounds like
primal.
Yeah, it sounds primal. It sounds like a caveman hitting you over the head. And just, there wasn't a lot of... Sabbath is not subtle at all. There's no, there's no subtlety or, what's the word? There's no pretension.
No.
Black Sabbath is not pretentious music, although I'm sure some people probably threw that out there because they didn't like the idea of crushingly simple riffs with... fairly heavy subject matter. I mean, just everything about it's heavy. It's like this heavy, stupid, simple, but completely like Iron Man is a riff in a song that seems like it should have been written on a stone tablet in the back of a cave somewhere.
Handed down to Moses from God.
Right. It's just, but it's
this is the song that will everybody. If
this is actually how the world ends. Wouldn't that be funny if that's actually if Iron Man actually does come true? It's actually a man that comes back through a magnetic field and turns to steel and then kills all of mankind.
But it's one of those things where like you think before, like, this is going to sound a little too extreme of an example, but like when you think of Johannes Gutenberg inventing book printing, you think, how come no one thought of that before him? How come nobody played like Black Sabbath before them?
Right, how come nobody thought of it? Right.
Yeah, like, oh, well, that's just simple but guitar playing. It's like, well, no one has done this before. Right. And you can see the seeds of punk in there too.
Absolutely.
Very simple riffs. Like, I mean, there's complex solos in there, but
they're simple riffs. I mean, the dude was missing 2 fingers.
Yeah.
I mean, the riff work, I mean, it is almost kind of like this, like I said, it's simple, it's direct, it's loud, it's like, there is something very primal about it. And, like I said, I think it is kind of hard for, reviewers to accept that. I think it's something that's kind of easy for reviewers of the time to make fun of, because it's like, oh, well, it's not as subtle and brilliant as like the Beatles, but it's like, all right, well, not too many things are, but like we can have other types of music too.
I keep picking on Fortunate Son because like that came out the year before, and it's not fair to rag on Creedence Clearwater Revival, but the point of that song is that like, since this was originally supposed to be an anti-war album, but the title got changed, we can see it through the lens of like, well, it is an anti-war album if you listen to all the songs on it. They just changed it to make it more, commercially viable. Like Paranoid, what does that mean? I'm crazy. Like the album does kind of give that vibe as well.
Right. Like don't like it's an interesting point. It's almost like the title is kind of discrediting all the realism that's in the lyrics. Like, this guy's just paranoid. The world isn't that bad. The rich really aren't sending poor people out to die in wars. This is some crazy hippie talk. But
like the CCR song, like it's very to the point. Like, oh, I have to go to war because I'm not a senator's son. Like, I can get that, but now they're like, war pigs is much bleaker than that. But I think there's more.
It's also like calling. Well, it's also it's angrier. It's more direct. Like it's like
it's not something that you're gonna sing on like a college campus. It's something that you're gonna like. You'll see in some sort of, I don't know.
Well, it probably would go over well on a college campus actually, but it's just like it's
back then.
It's absolutely. I think so. Absolutely. I think college kids would have loved something like this back then.
Speaking of Brad Wilk, you ever see that video of Rage Against the Machine performing like before anybody knew who they were on a college campus?
Yes. That's an interesting video. I love videos like that when you see a band before they get big and it's just like
no one knows them.
No one knows them, and people are just like looking, like walking by and just seem kind of bored watching them.
Yeah,
But
this was
that's the thing. I think reviewers at the time were doing the same thing. Yeah. Like they just didn't get it. Like they didn't get it yet. They didn't get that. They didn't get how much angsty, angry rock was going to take off. In like 20 years later. Like that's the thing. That's really when, because even in the 80s, critics didn't really think there was much to Black Sabbath. It wasn't until really the 90s that Ozzy and Black Sabbath kind of like underwent a renaissance, and then grunge bands, which we didn't talk about yet. Grunge bands started to Melvins and Nirvana.
Soundgarden.
Right. Nirvana, I think, once described themselves as we sound like the Pixies being molested by Black Flag or maybe even Black Sabbath.
Yeah. Like
the idea of like sludgy riffs mixed with like pop music became very big. Like people started to use the sonic directness of Black Sabbath and combine that with pop sensibilities, and then you basically get all of grunge.
Yeah. I picked up a copy of they have a reissue of Ultra Mega OK, the Soundgarden album, and I picked it up last week because it just came out, and also I went to go fish around for some Soundgarden albums because I realized that I was sorely short on them considering the recent passage of Chris Cornell last week. Mm-hmm. But I've known for a while because like I've seen the Melvins live, I've seen Chris Cornell live. I saw him 10 years ago, but they all do cite Black Sabbath, and it seems as though like the 80s kind of almost washed things like that out. Like Guns N' Roses kind of started bringing punk back into the mainstream, and then the grunge bands kind of just brought Black Sabbath back like completely to everybody.
Well,
Ozzy was still going on.
And
Black Sabbath was still going on.
Well, the interesting thing is that, and this is what's interesting about Black Sabbath, were commercially successful, particularly when Paranoid came out. Paranoid was a huge hit. But the weird thing is about just the evolution of metal is that it started to leave Sabbath behind because metal started to become more about technicality, the theatrics, and that's where you started to get like faster metal, like Judas Priest really took things further in the late 70s.
And then they combined it with British heavy metal.
Right, new wave of British heavy metal. Bands like Iron Maiden took it in like a more technical, speedier direction. And bands like Black Sabbath were just started kind of like, they were lame. They were seen as lame at the time because they didn't really fit in anywhere. Then metal took off, and then it was kind of like, well, you guys are still playing slow and bluesy, so that's lame. and that's what they were kind of like during the 80s. And throughout the 80s, music, like heavy metal music, just got like faster and more about like flashy outfits and shit. And it wasn't until the 90s, girls, glam metal and whatnot. And it wasn't until the 90s when it kind of went back to like, what if metal became about like protest music again and became like bleak and kind of like a angsty and angry and downery. And that's when people start to look back at Black Sabbath as like kind of like, well, wait a second, Black Sabbath kind of had it right the whole time.
Yeah. You can even hear it on like Nirvana's first album, Bleach.
Absolutely.
There's a heavy Black Sabbath influence there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really enjoy Bleach because like it sounds more, it's more metal than the rest of their albums. Like Nevermind's very commercial.
Yep.
And then In Utero tries to go back to like a non-commercial Bleach sound, but does it in a commercial sound.
Right.
It's kind of a hybrid of the two.
Right.
But the first Sabbath album is a classic. I don't know if anybody would have gone out and bothered with it had Paranoid really came on the scene. If you think, like, if Paranoid wasn't such a commercial hit, would people have followed Black Sabbath that much after that? Because they progressively, like, the songs on the first album are great, and so are Paranoid.
But there's no hit single. The problem is with Sabbath, it's the thing that I love about Sabbath, but the problem with Sabbath as far as getting bigger, Sabbath didn't write singles.
No.
Paranoid, I can't believe we didn't even talk about this. Let's talk about it now. Paranoid was written as an afterthought. They just jammed Paranoid out at the very end of the session. The producer was like, well, your album's a little bit short. You know, we still got about like 2 minutes we could write for a song. You guys want to jam something real quick? And they literally jammed Paranoid out in like 2 days and it became a hit. Probably because it was shorter. Sabbath songs tend to run a little long. They're usually about 5-6 minutes long. Sabbath is like 2 minutes and 30, which is almost unheard of for a Sabbath song.
Yeah, I think it's about, let's see. Is it the shortest album on this song?
It's definitely the shortest song on the album, except for maybe Rat Salad.
2 minutes and 48 seconds long. Yeah, Rat Salad instrumental is 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Every other song is almost, War Pigs is almost 8 minutes. So
the only other song that comes close is Planet Caravan at 4:32. But that's not like
a single.
That's not a commercial radio viable song at that length back then.
And Sabbath never did that. Masters of Reality, there's no singles on that album. No. That album, all the songs on that are long. Then going further, Sabotage, Volume 4. There are no easy radio singles on there. It's all long, epic, doom, blues, metal jams.
Zeppelin did the same thing. Zeppelin didn't release singles. They just... I think that they had singles they released to radio stations, but you couldn't go to your record store and be like, I want Stairway, please. Like, you had to pick up
I think Sabbath tried to release singles. I'm just talking about as far as, like, a song that radio would pick up on. Right. Like, I don't think the radio is going to play Sweet Leaf. Like, I'm talking about going forward, like Masters of Reality. They're like, all right, what's your follow-up to Paranoid?
Into the Void.
Like, yeah, Into the Void. It's 7 minutes long. Just doesn't seem to make much sense. Yeah, like if you look at everything on the album that followed this, Children of the Grave, no, way too heavy.
Also, it's too long of an intro for the radio.
Right.
After Forever's an awesome song, but I used to play that on SOU though. Like that's a great song to play on SOU. How long is that?
After Forever, it's 5 minutes and 27 seconds.
It's so long for commercial radio, though.
Right. No, it's all these songs are long. Sweet Leaf is about smoking weed, and it's really long. Solitude is another, like, slow psychedelic jammer.
There's another one they're not sure if Ozzy sang that one. Didn't Bill Ward actually sing that one? Solitude?
I got to do research on that.
Okay.
Let's talk about... You save that
We'll talk about that when we do our Masters of Reality cover.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Masters of Reality is one of my favorites.
But... Yeah, this was a great album that if you've never listened to it before, you just heard us listening to it. Or you could go down to they have record stores some places. You could download it somewhere.
Maybe this is a bad time to mention it, but if you haven't heard this album, you should definitely listen to it on its own before listening to it with two assholes talking over it.
Well, yeah. But I mean, it's sometimes people would even say that it sounds better when we were talking over it.
You think that? You think people like... I like the 2015 remaster of Paranoid, but you know how I really like to listen to it?
How?
With two assholes, with Ralph and Ganley talking over it.
Yeah. People will say that because you know why? In the beginning, people didn't like Black Sabbath, but eventually they learned to like them.
I bet people aren't gonna like us.
Yeah.
Maybe we just keep on trucking at it. Maybe we'll be as big as Black Sabbath.
Yeah, maybe in 30 years people will appreciate this show.
Be like how simple and direct it was. They just talked over albums like a couple of jerks.
All I wanted to hear was the solo, but I couldn't because they were talking over it.
So direct.
They talked about the solo. Anyhow,
I think that's a good way to end it.
yeah. We'll be back with some other album next time.
Absolutely.
So long.
So long.